The date is April 5th, 1909. The place is Phoenix, Arizona. Imagine standing on a dusty street corner, the smell of horses and early automobiles hanging in the dry desert air. You pick up a newspaper. The paper feels heavy, rough against your fingertips. It's the Arizona Gazette. The headline screams across the front page in bold black ink, "Explorations in Grand Canyon." But it is the subtitle that makes you stop in the middle of the street, ignoring the bustle of the city around you. It reads, "Mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to light." The article that follows is not a fluff piece. It is a detailed, methodical report that describes something impossible. It describes a city, not a temporary campsite, not a small village of mud huts, but a subterranean metropolis carved deep into the violent red rock of the Grand Canyon, a citadel capable of housing 50,000 souls. But the most terrifying part isn't the size, it is the origin. The builders of this forbidden city were not the ancestors of the Hopi. They were not the Navajo. According to the report, the artifacts found inside, the statues, the writing, the metallurgy, were Egyptian, or perhaps Tibetan. They were from a civilization that should have been thousands of miles away, separated by vast, impassable oceans. If the words printed on this paper are true, then everything you have ever been taught about human history is a lie. Columbus was not the first. The Vikings were not the first. Someone else was here. A powerful, sophisticated empire that mastered the globe while Europe was still clawing its way out of the Stone Age. They came here. They built a fortress in the dark, and then they vanished. It sounds like the plot of a fiction novel, but the man who found it, G.E. Kincaid, was not a writer. He was a seasoned explorer, a man of the earth, funded by the most prestigious scientific body in the United States, the Smithsonian Institution. He brought back proof. He brought back sketches. He brought back artifacts. And yet, if you go to the Grand Canyon today, you will find no plaque marking the entrance. If you search the Smithsonian's digital archives, you will find no record of the artifacts. And if you ask the park authorities, they will look you in the eye and tell you that G.E. Kincaid never existed. The cave is gone. The gold is gone. The history has been erased. But a newspaper doesn't just print a front-page hallucination and disappear. Something was found in the dark, 42 miles up the river from El Tovar Crystal Canyon. Something so dangerous to the established timeline of civilization that someone decided it had to be buried back in the dark forever. If you open a map of the Grand Canyon right now, you will notice something peculiar. The geography itself seems to be trying to tell us a secret. The names of the rock formations aren't random. They are specific. The Tower of Ra, the Temple of Set, the Pyramid of Cheops, the Isis Temple. For decades, geologists have dismissed these names. They tell us these are just romantic titles given by early explorers who had a fondness for Egyptian mythology. But ask yourself, what if they weren't being poetic? What if they were being literal? What if they named these peaks after Egyptian gods because they found evidence of Egyptian gods beneath them? The official story, the one in the textbooks, is that the Grand Canyon was home only to scattered, primitive tribes. Yet we are looking at a landscape that bears the names of the Nile Valley. And stranger still, vast sections of this national park, public land that supposedly belongs to you and me, are strictly off limits. There are no-fly zones where pilots are threatened with license revocation if they dip below the canyon rim. There are hiking trails that end abruptly at high-security fences. There are caves that are monitored by electronic surveillance. So, I have a question for you, and I want you to answer honestly. Why are vast areas of the Grand Canyon declared off-limits? Is it strictly for your safety, to keep you from falling? Or are they hiding the entrance to something they don't want us to see? Answer safety or hiding in the comments right now. We are about to open the file on the greatest archaeological cover-up in American history. We are going back to 1909. We are getting into the boat with Kincaid. Make sure you are subscribed to enter the Forbidden Zone, because once we step into that cave, there is no turning back. To understand the magnitude of what lies hidden in the rock, we first have to understand the man who found it. G.E. Kincaid. In 1909, the Grand Canyon was not a tourist attraction. It was a wound in the earth. It was a place of violent beauty and deadly isolation. Kincaid was not a tourist. He was a man of the frontier era, an explorer who had spent 30 years mining, digging, and surviving in the rugged terrain of the American West. He knew geology better than he knew people. He knew how to read the layers of sediment like the pages of a book. The Smithsonian Institution allegedly commissioned him for a survey. His mission was brutal in its simplicity. Document the flow of the Colorado River, traveling from Green River, Wyoming, all the way down through the jagged throat of the canyon to Yuma. He was traveling alone. Just a man and a small wooden skiff navigating some of the most treacherous whitewater in the world. Picture the scene. It is early spring. The air is crisp, but the sun is already carrying the heat of the desert. The canyon is silent, save for the constant, low-frequency roar of the water echoing off walls that rise thousands of feet straight up into the blue sky. Kincaid is a speck in a cathedral of stone. He is miles from civilization. If he breaks a leg, he dies. If he flips the boat, he dies. He is drifting through a landscape that looks exactly as it did 10,000 years ago. 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon, the current slows. Kincaid looks up at the east wall. He scans the sedimentary layers, looking for mineral deposits, looking for gold, looking for anything of value. And then he sees it. It isn't a ruin. It isn't a structure. It is a stain. On the east wall of the canyon, nearly 2,000 feet above the riverbed, he notices a peculiar discoloration in the rock. To an untrained eye, it would look like a shadow. But Kincaid stops paddling. He squints against the glare. The stain looks like sediment, but it's wrong. It doesn't match the layers around it. It looks like debris that has been moved. It looks like someone, a very long time ago, kicked tons of dirt over a hole to hide it from the river below. He beaches his boat on a narrow strip of sand. He stands there for a moment, looking up at the sheer cliff face. The anomaly is high up, dangerously high. In 1909, he doesn't have modern climbing gear. He doesn't have carabiners, ropes, or satellite phones. He knows that if he slips, he will fall 2,000 feet. The impact would shatter every bone in his body before he even hit the water, and the river would simply wash him away, another anonymous casualty of the canyon. But curiosity is a powerful force. It is the force that drove humanity out of the caves and across the oceans. Kincaid secures his boat. He packs his revolver, a heavy piece of steel on his hip. He packs his lantern, and he begins the ascent. The climb is a nightmare. The canyon wall is steep, a crumbling vertical maze of red sandstone and prickly scrub brush. Kincaid moves slowly. He tests every handhold. The rock is brittle. It crumbles under his fingers. The sun beats down on his back, soaking his shirt in sweat. His breath comes in ragged gasps. 1 hour passes. Then 2. The river below shrinks until it looks like a thin green thread. The wind begins to pick up, whistling through the crevices, threatening to peel him off the wall. But he keeps going. He reaches a narrow shelf, a ledge barely wide enough to stand on. He pulls himself up, his muscles burning, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stands up and brushes the red dust from his clothes. He walks behind a projection of rock that serves as a natural screen, hiding the shelf from the river below. And there, concealed by the geology itself, is the source of the stain. It is an opening. This is not a jagged natural tear in the earth. This is not a bare cave. Kincaid stands before a perfectly circular entrance cut with mathematical precision into the solid sandstone. It is undeniably man-made. The mouth of the cave is obscured by brush, seemingly placed there intentionally to mask it from below. He unhooks his lantern. He strikes a match. The smell of sulfur flares, followed by the smell of burning oil. The yellow flame flickers, casting long, dancing shadows against the smooth stone of the entrance. He draws his revolver. He takes a deep breath of the high-altitude air, and he steps inside. The first thing he notices is the atmosphere. In deep caves, the air is usually stagnant, heavy, smelling of bat guano, decay, and damp earth. But here, the air is fresh. It is cool. It is moving. Kincaid realizes instantly that this isn't just a hole in the wall. It is a complex system. Whoever built this place had engineered advanced ventilation shafts that pierced through miles of solid rock to cycle fresh air into the deepest chambers. It was a feat of engineering that rivaled the subway tunnels of New York City, built by a primitive people thousands of years ago. He moves forward, his boots crunching softly on the stone floor. As the light of his lantern pushes back the darkness, the walls reveal themselves. They are chiseled. They are smooth. The floor wasn't uneven bedrock. It had been leveled. He ventures roughly 100 feet into the main tunnel. The passage widens, and then it opens up into something that stops him dead in his tracks. The main hall. Kincaid estimates the main passageway is 12 feet wide, but it isn't just a tunnel. It is a thoroughfare. Branching off to the right and left are smaller passages, arranged like the spokes of a giant wheel, with this main hall acting as the hub. The symmetry is perfect. The geometry is flawless. He shines his light on the walls near the entrance. He expects perhaps to see crude petroglyphs, scratchings of deer, or handprints typical of the indigenous tribes of the region. Instead, he sees art. He sees tablets carved into the rock. He sees urns, hundreds of them, lined up in the shadows. He picks up a tool lying on the ground. It is made of copper, but copper is a soft metal. You can bend it with your hands. Kincaid strikes this tool against the rock wall. Clang. It rings out with a clear, bell-like tone. It doesn't dent, it doesn't bend. This is hardened copper. This is a metallurgical process that had been lost to time, a technique that even the chemists of 1909 couldn't easily replicate. Who taught them this chemistry? How did they smelt ore deep inside a mountain without suffocating? Kincaid finds a chamber roughly 50 feet from the entrance that seems to be a workshop or a foundry. He finds slag, the byproduct of smelting. The implications are staggering. This wasn't a temporary shelter. This was an industrial site. He continues deeper. The sheer scale of the place begins to dawn on him. This wasn't a hideout for a few dozen people. The mammoth chamber, as he calls it in the report, radiates outward into hundreds of rooms. He calculates the square footage in his head. He looks at the number of granaries. He realizes with a growing sense of dread and awe that he is walking through a city that could have housed 50,000 souls, 50,000 people living underground in the Grand Canyon. Why? Why hide a population the size of a modern city inside a mountain? What were they afraid of? Were they hiding from a cataclysm, a global flood? Or were they hiding from an enemy that dominated the skies? Kincaid checks his revolver again. The feeling of being watched is common in dark places, but here, surrounded by the remnants of a lost empire, the paranoia is palpable. He feels like an intruder in a tomb of giants. He presses on, his lantern beam cutting a thin slice through the suffocating blackness. He reaches the central hub, the Cross Hall, and it is here that the theory of Native American origin dies completely. Resting on a ledge, bathed in the yellow glow of the lantern, is a statue. Kincaid moves closer. The figure is sitting cross-legged. The face is serene, the eyes heavy-lidded. In each hand, the figure holds a flower, a lotus or a lily. Kincaid has traveled the world. He recognizes the iconography immediately. It looks Buddhist. It looks Oriental. It looks like something you would find in a temple in Tibet or a shrine in Kyoto. But he is in Arizona. He is 2,000 feet above the Colorado River. in a land that history books claimed was populated only by hunter-gatherers. What is a statue of the Buddha doing in the Grand Canyon? The craftsmanship is exquisite. The carving is not primitive, it is the work of a master artisan. The report mentions that the face is oriental in appearance, yet there are other elements, hieroglyphs carved into the base, that complicate the theory. He turns his light to the walls surrounding the idol. They are covered in script. If the statue was a shock, the writing is a sledgehammer to the timeline. Kincaid sees complex, geometric characters chiseled into the rock with metallic precision. They look Egyptian. They bear a striking resemblance to the hieroglyphs of the Nile Valley. Yet there are differences. It is a hybrid script, a language that seemed to bridge the gap between the pharaohs of Egypt and the emperors of the East. It is the writing of a civilization that had mastered the oceans, crossed the globe, and settled here. Heart racing, Kincaid pushes deeper into the complex, down one of the radiating corridors. The air grows cooler. The silence grows heavier. He is entering the crypt. The crypt is a massive chamber, and its layout is terrifyingly orderly. Along the walls are tiers of stone shelves, rising up into the darkness, and on each shelf lays a body. They are mummies, but they are not wrapped in the yucca fiber or rabbit fur typical of North American burials. They are wrapped in bark fabric and linen, treated with a clay-like substance to preserve the skin. Kincaid approaches the nearest tier. He lifts his lantern to the face of the dead. The skin is dark, hard as parchment. The features are sharp, but it is the arrangement of the bodies that chills him to the bone. Every single mummy in this section is male. There are no women, no children. This is a barracks for the dead. A warrior caste, or perhaps a priestly order, keeping a silent, eternal vigil over the sanctuary. The article details a gruesome hierarchy. The bodies on the lower tiers are crude, perhaps servants or lower caste warriors. But as Kincaid looks higher, the wrappings become finer. The artifacts buried with them become richer. He sees copper swords. He sees gold cups. He sees urns filled with what looks like grain or seed, preserved for a journey into the afterlife that began millennia ago. He stumbles upon a separate chamber, a vast granary cut into the rock, reminiscent of the cement silos of the modern Midwest. It is filled with seeds. He realizes the terrifying logistics of this place. These granaries could hold enough food to feed an army for years. This place was built to survive the end of the world. And then, there is the gray room. The report mentions a peculiar chamber with no ventilation, smelling of deadly gases, where the rock was a different color. Kincaid, sensing danger, doesn't venture far inside, but he sees enough to wonder if this was where the chemical preservation took place, or if it was a trap designed to kill anyone foolish enough to loot the sacred inner sanctum. Surrounded by gold cups, hardened copper swords, and the silent stares of mummified warriors, Kincaid realizes the burden of his discovery. This isn't just treasure, this is proof. Proof that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were not barriers to the ancient world, but highways. He grabs what he can carry, some photographs, a few small artifacts, and begins the long, terrified descent back to the river. He has to get to Yuma. He has to send the telegram. He has to tell the world. He didn't know then that the world wouldn't listen. He didn't know that the Smithsonian would arrive not to celebrate the find, but to bury it. On April 5, 1909, the Arizona Gazette dropped the bomb. But on April 6, 1909, the silence began. And that silence has lasted for over 100 years. If this discovery was real, where is it? Why isn't the Grand Canyon the most famous archaeological site on Earth? The answer lies in what happened immediately after Kincaid sent his telegram. According to the original report, the Smithsonian Institution mobilized immediately. They sent a man named Professor S.A. Jordan to verify the find. But Jordan wasn't just an observer. He was a closer. Imagine the scene in the weeks following the discovery. The canyon is dark, but the river is busy. Barges, large flat-bottomed boats, are moving silently upstream. Men in uniforms are setting up pulley systems on the cliff face. They aren't there to open a museum. They are there to clean house. The conspiracy suggests that under the cover of darkness, the Smithsonian looted their own discovery. Crate after crate was lowered down the rock wall. The mummies, the hardened copper swords, the statue of the Buddha, the tablets that contained the history of a lost epoch. All of it was loaded onto the barges and floated down the Colorado River, destined for the deep storage vaults of the Smithsonian Castle in Washington, D.C. But why? Why hide the greatest discovery of the millennium? To understand the motive, you have to understand the politics of 1909. You have to look at the man who ruled the scientific narrative of that era, John Wesley Powell. Powell was a hero. He was the one-armed Civil War veteran who famously rafted the Grand Canyon first. He founded the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian. He was the god of American archaeology. And Powell had a doctrine. He believed, and vehemently argued, that the Native American tribes were primitive, isolated savages. He believed they had no written language, no advanced metallurgy, and certainly no contact with the Old World civilizations of Egypt or Asia. This doctrine wasn't just a scientific theory. It was a political tool. It justified the expansion of the United States. It justified the taking of land. Now, imagine G.E. Kincaid walks out of a cave with a steel-hardened copper sword and a statue of Buddha holding a lotus flower. That single object destroys the Powell doctrine. It proves that ancient America wasn't an isolated wasteland. It implies that a sophisticated, technologically advanced civilization built a forbidden city in the Americas while Europe was still primitive. If Kincaid was right, Powell was wrong, and the Smithsonian would have to admit that their entire understanding of history was a fiction. So they made a choice. They didn't rewrite the history books. They erased the evidence. If you contact the Smithsonian today, and thousands have, they will give you a standard response. We have no record of a G.E. Kincaid. We have no record of a Professor S.A. Jordan. They claim the 1909 article was a hoax, but the Arizona Gazette was a reputable paper. They never printed a retraction. The story just stopped. And the cave? Explorers have tried to find Kincaid's tunnel for decades, but they found nothing. Some researchers believe the entrance was dynamited. If you want to hide a hole in a canyon wall, you bring in the demolition crew. You blast the shelf. You trigger a rock slide. You bury the entrance under 1,000 tons of sandstone rubble so that it looks exactly like the rest of the cliff face. You seal the tomb. But they couldn't seal the whole canyon. And this brings us to the most chilling part of the cover-up, the restricted zones. Today, there are vast stretches of the Grand Canyon that are strictly off-limits. You cannot hike there. You cannot camp there. Pilots are instructed to maintain high altitudes over specific sectors. The official reason is always public safety or bat habitats. But isn't it interesting that the most restricted areas align almost perfectly with the location described by Kincaid? Hikers who have strayed into these zones report being turned back by armed soldiers in unmarked jeeps. Since when does the National Park Service need a military perimeter? We are left with a haunting reality. The artifacts are likely collecting dust in a crate marked "Do Not Open" in a government warehouse. But the city itself, the silent city of the canyon, sits there in the dark, waiting. We have mapped the surface of Mars with higher resolution than we have mapped the floor of the Grand Canyon. It is a labyrinth of shadows. In the decades since 1909, hikers near the Isis temple have reported strange phenomena. They speak of unmarked black helicopters hovering silently below the rim. They speak of caves that appear on no map, guarded by heavy steel grates. They speak of a palpable sense of dread, the feeling of being watched by something ancient. G.E. Kincaid died in 1950. He never recanted his story. To his dying day, he maintained that he had walked the halls of a forbidden city. He maintained that he had seen the mummies, the copper, and the statue that shouldn't exist. The truth is, the evidence doesn't need to be in a museum to be real. The Smithsonian can burn the reports, they can hide the artifacts, but they cannot erase the rock. Somewhere, 42 miles up the river, 2,000 feet up the sheer face of the canyon wall, the wind is still blowing through a ventilation shaft cut by human hands 5,000 years ago. The dust is still settling on the granaries. The mummies are still standing their silent watch in the crypt. The city is still there. It is waiting in the dark. It is waiting for the rock slide to clear, or for a drone to fly just a little too close, or for a hiker to be just brave enough or foolish enough to cross the restricted line. We may never see the artifacts. We may never read the hieroglyphs, but we know the question. And sometimes, the question is more dangerous than the answer. If you believe that history is written by the winners, and that the truth is often buried in the losers' graves, then you are in the right place. We will keep digging. We will keep asking. If you enjoyed this journey into the forbidden, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The algorithm hates these topics, so we need you to share this video to keep the truth alive. Leave a comment below. If you found the entrance to Kincaid's cave tomorrow, would you go inside or would you run? Until next time, stay curious, stay suspicious, and watch the shadows.